This is episode 24 with Andrew Barnsley. I really enjoyed this conversation. We sat down at his office in Toronto, and I learned a lot about the TV industry. Obviously, when you work in the music industry, they kind of go hand in hand at some point. Being a musician or singer or whatever you end up doing a lot of TV work. So you're always fascinated by what goes on behind the scenes there. And Andrew is the executive producer of Schitt's Creek, a really popular show with Eugene Levy. And he is also launching a new show with Jan Arden called Jan, and that's coming out real soon. So keep your eyes open for that one. It's going to be really great. We sat back and talked TV and his career, and it's really fascinating. We have some mutual friends. We end up talking a lot about our good friend Brian Edwards, and Brian has an earlier podcast with me, and once you finish this one, you might want to go back and take a listen to Brian's, I believe it's episode 3, I think, right off the top. So it's a good one to listen to as well. If you want to check things out, I'm available on iTunes in session with Darren Walters. Make sure you leave some comments and leave those like buttons. And also DarrenWaltersPodcast.com. You can find me there. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Darren Walters 1, the number 1 on Instagram. And just say hello. I'd love to talk to you. All right, sit back and enjoy. And this is episode with Andrew Barnsley. We're rolling.
Great.
With Andrew Barnsley. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. Thank you for making the drive to Toronto. Nice to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a cool building here.
Yeah. We're in Pinewood Studios, which is, I think it's one of the largest production facilities in terms of stage space in North America. I know they have, I think it's the largest stage in North America, just, about 200 feet from here.
Wow.
It's like an acre indoors.
So what happens there? What's like some of the big things that happen?
Well, right now, Star Trek is being shot here.
Really?
Star Trek has taken over the whole place.
Wow.
But I first came here in, about 5 years ago, I think. So yeah, 2013. I had a series ordered. I had a pilot ordered from CTV. It was a multicamera sitcom called Spun Out. It was starring Dave Foley.
Yeah.
And we were looking for stage spaces, and Pinewood was kind of it was the prestige space for production. Yeah. We're like, well, let's go take a look and see if we could stay there, because it was a brand new building. And when we came, this is 5 years ago, we were the only tenant here.
Really?
We were the only production, and then within about 3 years, we shot the first season we shot the pilot of Spun Out here. We shot the series.
Yeah.
Then we shot Schitt's Creek here, the first season.
Yeah.
And then we did Spun Out, and then we did Schitt's Creek, and then the volume of production coming to Toronto became so big that it was impossible to get stage space.
Wow.
And we haven't shot anything here. I haven't shot anything here in, I'm going to say 3 years, but we still keep our offices here.
Yeah.
So it's a great place to be. There's a bunch of small Canadian companies here, but then there's a lot of sort of production offices that handle sort of the big U.S. shows. So Star Trek is here, and there's a few other, Guillermo del Toro shoots all his movies here.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a fun place to be. You never know who you're going to bump into.
Do you get a chance to zip over there, or is it pretty secure?
It's pretty secure. It's pretty secure, and me telling this story made me realize maybe I wasn't supposed to say Star Trek's here, but I think it's fine. I think people that know. But no, we can't get onto stages or anything like that. It's pretty buttoned down.
You just can't go walk your dog, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was here.
Yeah, I mean, you can walk through sort of the grounds and around here, but in terms of kind of getting onto a stage and seeing what kind of spaceship is being built, you can't really do that.
Yeah, it's kind of neat that, I think people drive by and they have no idea that's happening right there.
No idea. Yeah, I mean,
that's the way you want it.
It's the way you want it, and I think people sort of don't realize how much of a production hub Toronto has become for both domestic and international productions. I'm going to quote some numbers that are probably a little bit off, but last year I believe there was about $2.5 billion in terms of production in Toronto.
Wow.
Which, you think about that, that represents a huge industry.
Yeah.
Toronto now has infrastructure, world-class infrastructure for film and television production. We have world-class crews, so it's really become a destination for not only for domestic producers and productions, but also a lot of U.S. productions are coming up here as well.
And a dollar doesn't hurt.
The dollar helps a lot. So does a reliable tax credit system.
Oh yeah.
So that's an incentive as well that has really helped build the industry in Ontario.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. And it's like you said, it's a lot of people just don't realize it's going on, which is kind of neat. They can come and be quiet and do their thing, and unless they're shooting downtown Toronto or
right. Yeah, but this is a place people can kind of just show up for work.
Yeah.
There's security to get in, so people feel that they can kind of just be themselves, and it feels like coming to work. But the other thing too is kind of as the industry has evolved, Toronto's evolved as a city as well.
Yeah.
So that kind of things like the fact that there's nightlife, the fact that there's world-class restaurants, the fact that it's a cultural destination, that all attracts sort of executives and talent to Toronto, and it's a place where they want to be and don't mind coming to work for weeks or months or whatever the case may be.
And it's a relatively safe place too.
It is.
I think that makes
it really is
a big, everyone knows that Canadians are nice people and it's a safe place up here. And I think Toronto has its problems, but it's not like
for a big city though, it works. You probably had to fight some traffic on the way in, but it's just it is what happens when you live in a place like Toronto.
So did you, being a TV guy, did you watch the Super Bowl this weekend?
I did.
Yeah.
I did watch the Super Bowl.
So what'd you think?
Well, I'm not a huge football fan, but I do like to tune in for event television. I mean, you look at Brady, and it is phenomenal, the career he's had, and kind of how he still is able to deliver. But, what was it, 3-0 going into the half? That doesn't make for a fun football game to watch, particularly for somebody who's not watching a lot of football.
Yeah.
You kind of, as somebody who doesn't watch a lot, you want to see the high-scoring games and a lot of offense, but it really was a defensive game.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought the same thing. And so what did you think of the halftime show?
It was fine. It was fine. I enjoyed it. I thought, but it really felt a bit too Maroon 5-y for me.
Felt really safe.
Yeah, it felt safe.
There's nothing wrong with it, I found, but there was nothing that I could say that I need to watch that again.
No, but
I know when Bruno Mars was on, I found myself, I want to watch that again. But
the stuff I was looking forward to Travis Scott, and I was looking forward to Big Boy, and they were just on for a very brief amount of time. Like I felt like they could have relied or programmed that a bit more with those acts, but it was fine. I'm gonna say
it's kind of a no-win situation to do that now, and I think it's become such a. You hear more about the halftime show afterwards than you do about the actual game. Yeah, and you almost want, and it almost seems to be a thing, a stronger point to not do it now,
right?
Well,
everything's so politically charged,
too.
So you're kind of up against that as an artist. You're making decisions that are beyond artistic decisions too. When you decide to go on an event, large scale event with huge audiences as well. But one of the reasons I really wanted to watch the Super Bowl this week is we have a new show that's airing on CTV here in Canada, and we had our first promo during the Super Bowl.
Awesome.
So it was nice to see that. So
unfortunately, I'm a DirecTV subscriber.
So you were getting the US feed. That's okay. I'll tell you all about it.
Feed. I shouldn't be saying that on the podcast either, but yeah, I have been. When you live out in the country, it's you have some choices and you have to make.
Yes,
and that's fair. I made several years ago.
Yeah.
But
I won't hold that against you.
Yeah, so that must have been pretty exciting to see that pop up.
It was really exciting. Yeah, it was our first real promo for the show. And to have it seen by, a big audience like that, it really creates a lot of buzz all of a sudden. And it makes the show real. So, all of us who've been working on, this is a show that we're producing for CTV starring Jan Arden.
Yeah.
It was created by Jan and a couple other creators, writers, and the runway you need on a series to develop it, to pitch it, to sell it, to get it to air is, this is 3 years in the making. So to finally see it broadcast, see that your show is actually going to be on air, it's quite a feeling. There's pride, there's joy. There's you just feel. You think about the journey that you've been on to get here, and it's remarkable, and it's just nice to know that all this work that we've put into something is actually going to be seen.
And it was during the Super Bowl, which is,
it was during the Super Bowl.
that's, you can't get any better advertising slot than that.
Yeah, if you put sort of we all know sort of the dollar figure of those ad times, and so to have a presence during the Super Bowl is pretty great.
Yeah. So let's talk for people who don't know what you do now. Let's give a brief description of your kind of your job title here, and then we'll go back kind of a few years and start from the beginning and see. But I think that'd be a good start to let people know what you do.
Yeah, it's actually a really good question. I get asked it a lot, what I actually do, and I think I've been at it for professionally for about 15 years now, and I think my parents now just know what I do.
Yeah.
So it takes. It's a bit of an elusive title, and it's a title. The title is executive producer, and I also run a company called S&S Productions, and we have an office in Toronto, here in Toronto, one in Los Angeles as well. But the thing with it, the title executive producer can mean different things to different people.
Yeah.
So how I define it and how it defines me is it's really focusing on the business side of television. So I tend not to get my hands too dirty with the creative side of it. I find the easiest way for me to explain what I do is to explain the relationships I have.
Yeah.
So my relationships are with talent, which is, it can be stars, it can be writers, it can be show creators. So that, I have those relationships with talent, but then I also have relationships with the buyers. Yeah. So those are the broadcasters, the distributors, the studios. And then sort of diving further into sort of the business side, I have relationships with banks, accountants, lawyers, agents, that sort of thing.
The money side. Yeah.
The money side. So, how it kind of plays out is if me as a producer or this company want to start a project, typically what happens is we take a pitch. Yeah. We hear a pitch from somebody who has a show idea. We sort of make a determination of whether or not it's something we want to invest resource in, time, money, bandwidth, that sort of thing. And the determination that we make, or the analysis we make, is this something, we want to potentially dedicate years of our lives to, but also is this something that we think can sell? Is this a story or a world that we want to back and we want to get out into the world and have audiences consume? And then we kind of think about where we can take it. So we spend some time, if we do find an idea we like, we tend to build a team around the idea. Yeah. Generally, that's sort of creative support, whether it's adding a writer or what we call a showrunner or some story editors to help sort of bolster the creative. And then we take it to market. So, we take it to sort of our broadcasting partners, find out if it's something that people are interested in, if broadcasters want to support it. And then what you look to do is you look to have a broadcaster come on board and develop the show with you. There, yeah. So that means having scripts ordered. Yeah. So, we hope to sell a couple scripts, and then we spend, normally it takes a phase of development takes about a year to go through. So there's a lot of back and forth with the creative team, with the broadcaster. It's really about shaping a show and finding a world that works for an audience. Yeah. And then you sort of go through that process. And I don't know the exact ratio, but generally I think for every 10 shows that are developed, one might get ordered. So you just hope that you've built the right team and you're hitting the right notes, and it's something that the broadcaster's interested in for their channels, and then you hope for a green light and an order for a series to get ordered, and then that's when kind of my job really starts, which is then where do we find the money, because it's not just the way that Canadian television works now. It's not just about domestic product. It's really you need to be thinking globally as a producer, as a content creator. So we generally don't get fully financed out of Canada, which is one territory in the world. So we have relationships with buyers in different territories, including other broadcasters, studios, distributors that then we start those conversations with, and hopefully can put the pieces together to actually make the show.
Yeah. Here's a question I've always wondered: how often do you get in a circumstance of financing a show, would you have private backers, like people with lots of money just looking to put?
For us, it's very rare.
Very rare.
Yeah, it does. We tend our financing, and our financing comes from. I can kind of walk through where the money comes from. On a Canadian show, it comes from a broadcaster in the form of a license fee.
Yeah.
And then there are some public and private funds that we tap into, the biggest being Canada Media Fund. Mm-hmm. So they support, I think it's a $200 million fund, so they support Canadian television across all broadcasters. Canadian broadcasters get envelopes of money allocated to them. Some of that takes the form of equity, some of it takes the form of what they call a license fee top-up. And then there's 2 tax credit programs for Ontario producers. There's a provincial program and a federal program. And then that generally gets you about 75 to 85% financed.
Yeah.
And then you look to either the producers to invest. We will invest in our own shows if we feel we're going to sell it around the world.
Yeah.
Or you lean on your relationships with distributors, international distributors that might come on board with an advance against future sales, and that's how you close your financing. But private equity actually will grind your tax credits.
Oh yeah.
So there are some downsides to it if you're within the sort of the traditional broadcast model.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because it's not too far off of a singer's career to some degree.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there's lots of parallels there to finance and
in Canada too, where there are public subsidies that have built the industry as well. And it's interesting to look at sort of those public subsidies in the context of music, where there have been huge stars that have come out of Canada as a result of that, like the quota system, CanCon quota system, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And what's interesting now, where sort of the talent on the music side has really found international footing for decades, but it hasn't really happened on the TV side until recently.
Right.
So now we're starting to see, international hits coming out of Canada, shows that are traveling, and that is a large part to do with the support we get on the public side of things.
Yeah, and it seems to be big support when it comes to a lot of the kind of HD TV shows. You see, at the end you see those scrolling by, and you see that big Canada.
Well, you'll see it on every show
Yeah.
that's produced out of Canada.
But there's a lot, you see a lot of the HD TV shows are all Canadian financed.
That's right.
Shows and
you even mean on the US
on
feeds?
The US
on your
feeds,
direct TV feed.
Sorry,
yeah.
Did I bring that up again?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, those shows are traveling, and
a large majority.
Yeah,
you see.
That's right. That's right.
Which is neat to see, because I think a long time ago, or not that long ago, that the Canadian shows really stayed in Canada, didn't they? To some
That's
extent.
how the system was built. Like you used to, it's not that long ago. Canadian producers really just looked at Canada as where you would sell your show, where you would make your money, and it would live domestically. It was very rare for shows to travel outside, and a consequence of that is that producers just thought that way. They didn't think globally. And now, just the way the funding has changed, the way quality of television has sort of dramatically increased, and the demands on production value that consumers expect. It's really changed sort of the conversation and the business model, where now domestic producers really need to think internationally and need to have the international relationships to actually have a sustainable business.
So what do you think has made the Canadian productions, like the quality of them, so much better than they used to be? Is it there's just that many more qualified people up here, or is it just everyone's just kind of buttoned up? And
I think so. I mean, it takes a while for an industry to grow and evolve and get to a certain standard.
Budgets would be to some degree, right?
Budgets have increased in Canadian shows because we all want to compete globally now. We all want to kind of leave our mark and build global brands. But a couple things, the industry in Canada has grown so much in the last 20 years, and a lot of that has to do with things like tax credits, reliable tax credit systems, the dollar, that sort of thing. And then infrastructure follows. So you actually kind of create an infrastructure, you create a talent pool of skilled labor, and it just, the industry continues to elevate and elevate and elevate. Another factor as well is that a bit of an equalizer, one of the big distinctions between Canada and US in terms of production value for such a long time, and this is really simplifying things, but US shows were shot on film and Canadian shows were shot on video, and that was just an aesthetic. There was such an aesthetic difference between Canadian shows and US shows. That's not the case anymore. With the transition to digital, we're all using the same cameras, we're all lighting the same way. So that really leveled the playing field on the technological side, and that has kind of made the production value, sort of leveled out the production value of those. So there's a couple factors at play here, but when I go to Los Angeles and they say the shows that I've made, like there was a time where people thought they didn't want to touch Canadian shows, and we've kind of, and it's not just shows I've made, Orphan Black's a great example. It started with Flashpoint. We can make the argument it started with Flashpoint, where just the production values were there where you couldn't differentiate before. And Canadians used to do that. When I went to school for television, we always talked about how you could just turn the TV on and you could recognize right away what's Canadian, what isn't. That's not the case.
You did anymore. On the radio too.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
I mean, I found.
Why is that?
That's a tough one too, and I think part of that was the same thing. People went to Nashville, and people went to LA, and went to New York, and there was just a bigger talent pool, better studios, and it just got done better because they were doing it all the time. And now I think it's hard to tell when I listen to the radio now, Canadian production or Canadian artists come on, and I'm like, I wonder if that was recorded here or if that was recorded somewhere else. I don't know. But I used to know right away. Say, oh, here's a Canadian artist, and they wouldn't even intro the artist name or here's the next song that started, and I would know. Oh, here's a Canadian artist.
That's interesting. Well,
but now I don't find that difference now.
You're right too about talent. Like, I mean, with talent, it was often the case, and it kind of for a long time, and to a certain degree still now, it was all, on the TV side, the film side, it was like, how do I get to Hollywood? How do I get to LA? How do I do that? And now we're starting to see a lot of talent, like recognized talent, wanting to come back and work in Canada, and they, it's home and it's time to come back, but they also, the cities like Toronto and Vancouver and Montreal have a lot to offer, where it doesn't feel like the boonies anymore. Like, it actually, there's a lot going on, and they're global cities. So you're not necessarily having the same fight to bring talent home. Because that would be, I would imagine, something similar to the music side, where people are just like, how do I get out of here? How do I?
I think they can do so much from home now. It's not, it's not an issue. You can make conference calls. You can be, your email's so fast. You can text so fast, and it's before you'd almost have to make a meeting to see somebody.
Exactly.
And now you can reach out to somebody that you don't know via Instagram, and they might get back to you.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, they might look at your profile and say, hey, that looks like a cool person, and they might say hey back. You might say something to a star on Twitter, and they might reply back to you.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a pretty fun time.
Yeah, that didn't happen before. You'd have to run into them at a restaurant or something by chance to say hello.
Yeah.
And have to be in LA or wherever.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, how much does things like Netflix and the internet and YouTube and all these things, has that made Canadian productions more accessible to people as well? Does that play into it?
Yeah. When we're on the selling side, so when Netflix shows up or Amazon shows up or YouTube now has they're buying content. We just see them as buyers now, where before we were really limited to sort of conventional buyers, being sort of networks and that sort of thing. So there are more opportunities in terms of sellers, in terms of buyers. But the other thing too is that these become huge forces, huge cultural forces. Like Netflix has just changed the landscape, and it just makes so much content available at any time.
Yeah.
You're not sort of beholden to a linear schedule anymore. So we've seen this with Schitt's Creek, where when Schitt's Creek moved to all the episodes became available on Netflix in the US. That happened, I think, after we'd been on air for 3 years. It just changed the conversation. It really, the show was discovered, and it was this slow boil that finally, it became a bit of a phenomenon and had this cultural impact that, you kind of hope that happens, and you kind of hope that the shows that you work on will resonate. But it's been incredible how the show has gained traction and support around the world, and so much of that has to do with the platform of Netflix, the reach of Netflix, and it's really kind of just changed the conversation around the show.
Yeah, it's I was just thinking now, when we grew up, I'm sure we're not too far in age difference. There was a lot of local TV shows.
Yeah,
I grew up in. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up, I was born in southern Alberta. I lived in Lethbridge, Alberta until I was 12, and then my family moved east, so I went to high school in Halifax.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, we'll get back to that.
Yeah.
So I grew up in the Kitchener area, so we had our CTV local station there, and they produced a lot of shows.
Yeah.
And our family, we had multiple shows on CKCO, and a syndicated show across Canada. But they did that, had Bowling for Dollars, it was a big show. Yeah. And so now you look at any local channels besides maybe their local news.
There's not a lot of
There's
programming.
nothing.
Yeah, there's nothing. No, that's something that has really changed in terms of the landscape. And
but maybe has brought some degree, you look at, it's made these other shows that much better, right?
Yeah, it's a global audience. I think the producers that survive and succeed are the ones that think globally, and it's just how do we make something special here in Canada that we think will find an audience around the world. My challenge has been that I've really been focusing on comedy. That's really been for my whole career. I've been doing scripted comedy, producing scripted comedy, and comedy is one of the toughest genres of show to sell internationally, because comedy tends to be very domestic, very local. So sensibilities, comedic sensibilities tend not to travel. So what's funny to you and me here in Canada isn't necessarily funny to somebody in, New Zealand.
Yeah.
Or and because it is a global world, it's probably not funny to somebody in Italy too, when it gets translated and that sort of thing. So on the comedy side, it can be a bit tough. And it's also, I think, one of the reasons, there's been a real shift in what comedy is on TV right now. We've really moved away from these big, broad sitcoms that, have a laugh track, that are shot in front of live audience, that really rely on how many jokes per page. It really was, there were joke counts, and now sort of the trend for comedy has moved away from joke driven content to really character driven content. So the comedy comes from the character, comes from the situation rather than the jokes.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, we're starting to see a bit of the appetites are changing around comedy, where character does translate. Character does translate to different cultures. Story translates, but it's the jokes that don't. So with comedy moving away from jokes,
Yeah.
does that make sense to you?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So if you're relying on the comedy to come from the characters in those situations, that's more likely to translate than if it's just
Delivery is even more important now than it ever was. Where the line could almost sell it, where it's almost physical.
Yeah.
The way, if you watch it makes you laugh just as much as the line.
Yeah,
makes you laugh.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's joke writing is such a craft and it's such a skill. But when it comes from character, that's where you see people are picking up. Audiences invest in character now the ways they haven't ever before. People talk about characters like they're friends, and they're like, what will so and so do on the next episode? They're really invested in character.
And I think partially too is that they can follow the character on social media and feel that it's not this elusive person that they've may never,
and the actor, the character and the actor.
Yeah.
You can have a connection with a big star because they're giving you updates multiple times a day and have things to say and connect to you,
and that draws you in.
It does draw you in, and it adds to the whole experience as a fan.
Yeah.
Too. No, it's a really interesting time to be sort of a content consumer.
Oh yeah. I can't imagine where it's going to go. I mean, it's I think it was stayed a certain way for so long, and now it's really ramping and changing. I don't, it's hard to predict what's going to happen. I mean, with the technology changing and being able to have my iPhone right here, and I can have any TV show I want.
Yeah, right away
in a second, right here, wherever I go.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. So let's go back. So you mentioned you grew up in Lethbridge for a while.
I did. Yeah. I was born and raised there.
Been there many times.
Yeah.
Done a bunch of shows there.
Yeah. It's
hasn't changed much.
It has not changed much. I went back there. Last year I went back there and I still have some friends there, and it hasn't really changed much. Yeah. But it was nice to stay connected to Alberta and Southern Alberta. But I lived there until I was 12. And then my family moved to Nova Scotia, which is sort of the other side of the country.
Yeah, it's a big move.
It was a big move. And
so what made that move happen?
My father was an academic and an administrator, so he went. The family moved because there was an opportunity for him, a professional opportunity for him, and it just made sense. So we went there. Excuse me. And that's where I went to high school.
Yeah.
I loved Halifax a lot, but it was tough. I mean, it's tough when you cross the country when you're going into grade 8, and it was a very lonely time, and it was a very kind of formative time for me. What's interesting is I really kind of feel I found comedy at that point in my life where, I don't know what there's a couple of factors at play here, but it was around the time where cable was starting to change television, and there was a lot more channels. I remember A&E was a channel at the time, and they had Evening at the Improv, and that was, so I found kind of like stand-up comedy. Eddie Murphy had released, I think it was Delirious around that time, and we found, Delirious and Raw, those were very, very formative stand-up moments for me.
Yeah.
I found Mad Magazine.
Oh yeah.
And from a Canadian side, I found Kids in the Hall, and I found Codco, and that's really where I feel my connection to comedy was really crystallized, where I became a bit of a comedy nerd and really kind of just wanted to consume and experience as much as I could. And a lot of it had to do, I think, with being, a lonely teenager. who just wanted to laugh too. And I kind of saw the value of comedy and the fact that it was sort of the escapist side of it and how it could sort of make you feel good and you know, kind of the value that laughter and comedy could bring to people. And it also brought people together. Like, I remember watching those shows with my family and kind of really enjoying that, having that sort of collective experience as well. But that's really where, you know, it takes time to kind of, when you look back, it takes time for you to look back and see sort of the moments that shaped who you are.
Yeah. So did you have, you're in high school.
Yeah.
What kind of interest did you have? Did you, obviously, you know, it's not like being a musician. You started playing guitar when you were 3 and, or, you know, so what were those kind of hobbies that you had? And obviously you said comedy was one of those things, but did you have any?
Well, I don't think it was, it wasn't, comedy wasn't really a hobby in the sense that I was writing or performing or anything like that.
Yeah.
I really just enjoyed being a fan and consuming it. And that, for me, what I kind of did in terms of extracurricular activities, I wasn't a bad student. I you know, enjoyed learning. I enjoyed going to school. I liked the social side of it. So, I mean, I did go from, you know, having a lonely start when I moved out there, but, you know, developed friendships and that sort of thing. So I got involved in student government and student leadership in high school. And I played hockey while I was out there as well. So I kept active with hockey, but I was really involved in the school community in terms of student government and leadership. And it's kind of when I first started, you know, flexing some entrepreneurial muscles as well. And, you know, we as a fundraiser, when I was in student council, I remember we started like a clothing line that I think to this day still exists at the high school. And I was one of the founders of a larger sort of student organization, sort of a student government organization. So we brought we were kind of the executive of this high school organization that brought all other sort of high school student executives together for the first time and created like a student organization for the province of Nova Scotia. So I kind of had sort of large, sort of ambitious tendencies as early as, you know, grade 11, grade 12.
You could see that you had skills that you're doing now back then, like organizational skills.
Organization, team building, sort of project oriented. That's definitely, you know, and a lot of that is sort of navigating, it's sales too. It's kind of like you're pitching all the time. You're having to understand sort of systemic power structures, that sort of thing. And how do you navigate that to move things in particular directions? So like I was kind of flexing those muscles early on without knowing what I was doing. It was just sort of, I was goal oriented. I was like, you know, this is where we want to end up. How do we get there? What's the team we need to build? What are the milestones that we need to hit to get there?
So you finish up high school and out in Halifax, where did you find yourself wanting to do after that?
Yeah, it's sort of an interesting story. I ended up going to a very small liberal arts university called Mount Allison University. Mm-hmm. And at the time, and it still may be, it was, I don't know if you remember, but Maclean's magazine used to rank the universities, and it was consistently, you know, one of the top universities. And my parents were academics. My dad was in the university business. And, you know, that just seemed like the right place to go. You know, I'd get a good education, you know, set me in the right direction for a career. Had no idea what I wanted my career to be. And I moved to Sackville, New Brunswick, which, you know, the population of that town doubles in September when the student body shows up. Yeah. And, you know, I was there for 2 years, and I went hoping that something would speak to me. I didn't have a plan. I was waiting for a program to be like, okay, or a course that would just be like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm committed to doing. Yeah. And it never happened. And after 2 years, I just really started to think about, you know, where am I going? What am I doing? Is this it? Like, I had enough awareness to kind of know that that was a very important time in my life in terms of starting a path. Yeah. And I just made the decision in my third year of university that this wasn't for me. I wanted to, and it kind of comes back to McLean's for a second. It was that the third year I was in university, there was McLean's, the university issue. I was just going through it, and I saw that there was a university program at Ryerson here in Toronto called Radio and Television Arts. And it had kind of never dawned on me that was an option, that I could go to university and make TV. Like I felt there always was this pull to something creative, something media-oriented, but I just didn't know what that meant or how to do that. And then when I saw that it actually was, and my parents being academics, I knew it was important for me to go to university. I knew it was important to get a degree, and it felt like it was a bit of a loophole that I'd found where it's like, okay, I can get a degree in television. So that became a goal and an ambition of mine, is how do I get to do that? So I dropped out of school, and I ended up doing joining a group of sort of young students, and well, not just young students, young people. There was an organization that was sponsored by and funded by the Rotary Club of Canada, and I just found this myself. And basically, it was a program that sort of went from high school to high school across the country. There were 6 teams going and talking to students about how to get more involved, how to become more active, how to kind of avoid kind of complacency, how do you kind of understand leadership. And it was a program that really spoke to me, and I ended up joining that after I dropped out of school. Did that for roughly a semester, and it gave me a sense of kind of learning about audience, learning what it meant to have content that spoke to people directly, and that can kind of, maybe initiate change and confidence and all that kind of stuff. So I did that with the idea that I wanted to do something that would kind of I could leverage to get into Ryerson and show that I had an interest in media. So I applied to Ryerson, and they came back to me and they said, listen, you've already done 2.5 years of university. Why don't you finish your degree and come back, reapply when you're done, and there's a 2-year program. So if you already have certain courses, you can fast track this degree. You don't need to take all the electives or sort of the foundational courses. You can focus on just the radio and television arts program. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. So I ended up, but I knew that Mount Allison didn't offer anything that I wanted to do. So I transferred to Carleton University to study film studies. Yeah. And I studied film studies and really got with the idea of I really wanted to get a foundation in visual storytelling, kind of understand what it meant. So I studied film, not production, sort of film theory, film analysis for 2 years at Carleton, got my degree in film studies. And while I was, and this is kind of part of the story as well, while I was in Ottawa, that was 1995, and there had just been a federal election. Oh, and I kind of have to back up a little bit too. Being sort of ambitious and not having terrible grades, I knew I was going to Ottawa to school, and just by chance I saw, or I think an ad was put in front of me for a job on Parliament Hill to be a page in the Senate of Canada. And it was funny, back then they only hired from one province or one region every year. Yeah. So if you were the right age but not in the right region, you weren't eligible to apply. Yeah. So I was in New Brunswick. My family had moved to Fredericton by that point. My dad moved to a different university. So I was in New Brunswick, and that just happened to be the year that the Senate of Canada was hiring pages from New Brunswick. And I ended up getting a job in the Senate of Canada as a page.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. So I went to Ottawa. I was going to study film studies. I was going to have a job on Parliament Hill. And shortly after moving to Ottawa, or shortly before moving to Ottawa, there had been a federal election, and there was a new government. And there was a new member of Parliament from Fredericton. Yeah. So me being 20 years old, not knowing anything, just being naive, I was like, I'm new to Ottawa. I'm new to Parliament Hill. There's a new member of Parliament from Fredericton. Why don't I give him a call and see if he wants to hang out? So I called him. It was a guy by the name of Andy Scott, and he's like, "Yeah, sure, let's go for lunch." And we went for lunch at the Parliamentary Restaurant, and it was just a bit of a clunky conversation. Like, neither of us knew why we were there really. Like, what are we talking about? Like, but we had the lunch, and at the end of the lunch, Andy kind of said, "What do you want to do? Like, what are your career ambitions, and what are you studying, all that kind of stuff, but where do you want to end up?" And I think it was probably one of the very first times I said out loud that I want to be a television producer. And he looked at me, he's like, "You want to be a television producer?" I was like, "Yeah, I think that's what I want to do." He's like, he said, "It's funny you say that." He's like, "I have a TV show where every week we report back, we talk about what's happening in Ottawa and how it relates to the constituents of Fredericton." Yeah. He said, "If you want to host and produce it, it's yours."
Wow.
So I was like, "Yeah, okay, that sounds good. Let's do that." And I did that for 2 years while I was in Fredericton, when I was in Ottawa. And every week the tapes got flown or sent to Fredericton and got put on community television. And that was really kind of the first time it was the first time that I'd done anything in television, and kind of really started to see what it meant to be a producer, what it meant to put things together, what it meant to have things go to air. And then from that, at the time, I really felt I felt I had to have a plan for what I wanted to do with my degree, if I got accepted to Ryerson. And at the time, I believed strongly in sort of the power of television, the ability for television to be at the time an educational tool, which I still think it can be. So I felt I wanted to do go into children's television. I thought that was kind of the path that I wanted to take. Yeah. And because I wanted to I knew how competitive it was to get into Ryerson for their radio and television arts program, I wanted to make my application undeniable. So after graduating from Carleton, I went to St. Thomas University in Fredericton to get my education degree. So I did a 1-year program, got my education degree, so that I could say, I want to go to children's television, and I have the credentials to do it.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Mm-hmm. And so I did that, and so I got my education degree, applied to Ryerson, got in, and that kind of is where sort of the formal education of television began. So I did a 2-year radio and television arts program, got a degree there. While I was there, I started interning at CBC on a show called Jonavision, and I started to sort of understand the internal mechanics of CBC, started to build relationships that I have to this day. And once I graduated from radio and television arts, I did my master's degree in communications and culture at Ryerson in York. And during that time, I produced a feature film as part of my program, and then started my first production company. Wow. With somebody who I met on that feature film, and we developed shows while I was a graduate student, and it's just a case of right place, right time, right project. When I graduated with my master's degree, I had a series ordered. So I moved right into being a professional producer.
Wow.
And that's when I started working with, we sold a show, and the broadcaster said, we love the idea, we wanted this, but you need to sort of work with a senior producer. Is there somebody that you would like to work with? And in fact, they introduced me to a guy by the name of Dave Smith. Dave Smith at the time was running S&S Productions with his brother Steve. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how that, my relationship to, Dave Smith, Steve Smith, and ultimately our mutual friend Brian Edwards, all that kind of came out of that.
So Steve Smith, for people who are listening, don't know, would be Red Green.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So we did this first show. It was called Listen Missy. We did it for Chorus here in Canada. And we worked with Dave Smith under the S&S banner.
Wow.
Yeah. So
you did, so what age do you think was it that you finished in Ryerson?
Ryerson with my master's degree, I was late 20s. I would have been. I would have
say that's a lot of schooling.
That's a lot of schooling. Yeah. So I think I was 28 or 29.
So at that time, were your parents still? Were they like, "What are you doing?"
Kind of. I mean, as long as
you're still in school.
As long as I was in school, they were happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they started to see that it was it was real work. There was money, and I wasn't relying on them to subsidize my existence, and I always had a couple degrees I could fall back on if I needed to. I haven't had to use those yet to fall back on, but I've certainly used the experiences I got out of those degree programs to help with my career.
So, pretty driven. I mean, that's
pretty driven. Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot in there in that short amount of time.
Yeah, I know. But it all happened organically. Like it never felt like I was forcing anything. It kind of was who I was and who I am. Like I spend a lot of time talking to students now, and you tell people the realities of this business, how tough it is, but for me, it really did just happen organically. It never felt forced. It never felt like I was chasing something that I shouldn't be chasing. Yeah. But
you were still making it happen.
I was still making it happen, but it happened incrementally. Yeah. And, you kind of look back and it's like, okay, there's a moment where things kind of changed. There's another moment where things kind of changed. And you kind of just these small building blocks that eventually turn into a real career.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see little things like you mentioned when you were the page and you made the call. I mean, just
what was I thinking?
Yeah,
it didn't
but
make any sense.
You made the call.
Yeah.
But you look back. Well, that was probably
a turning point.
Yeah,
100%.
And if you wouldn't made that call,
yeah, and it's a lesson I learned early on. It's sort of like one of the keys to success is just showing up, and showing up for me was making the phone call you didn't want to make, or you felt uncomfortable making. I really, from a very early stage, even when I was, from a very early stage, I was comfortable being uncomfortable, or I was fine being uncomfortable. And I think that ability to live in discomfort, knowing that I would come out stronger, whatever it was, that really changed kind of my life and the trajectory professionally and personally too. But going back to high school, where it was like, okay, I'm going to put myself in challenging situations, socially challenging situations, and see what happens and come out of that. And I kind of had a successful high school experience, even though I was somebody who showed up in grade 8 and knew nobody. But it was just sort of, there was some weird ambition that was built into me, and the ability to kind of focus in on goals I wanted to achieve and just figuring it out, and knowing that a lot of that would be uncomfortable. The journey would be uncomfortable. And
I think there's a lot to learn when you're in an uncomfortable situation.
It makes you stronger. It's the only way to grow is to...
I threw myself in a lot of uncomfortable situations.
Of course, yeah.
And I think a lot of people do, but you can't be afraid to do it. Now, if I look back to some degree, I think I put myself in an uncomfortable position in something that I was somewhat comfortable in.
Right.
But then realize I was comfortable. I mean, you kind of put yourself, but that's because that's where you're heading, right? That's what you're focusing yourself towards. So if I wanted to, I know I put myself in a musician or a type situation where I probably didn't belong, right?
Yeah.
But it made me rise to occasion, and then on technical end of things, I was thrown into doing sound at big concerts where I stood behind the console and I looked at it and I was like, okay, I have to figure this thing out. I've never been in front of this console before. But the guy next to you they can't know that that's your first time. Yeah, you have to, you ask the right questions that, doesn't make you look like a fool, but then you have to still somewhat rise to the occasion and make it deliver. And I think those putting yourself in those positions is really important.
No, that is kind of, I feel that's one of the secrets to success for me, is just making the phone calls I didn't want to make, having the meetings I didn't want to take.
I'm sure you still deal with that.
Of course, yeah.
Daily.
I do. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that's how you grow. And I think and it's not for everybody. Like I certainly don't judge people that don't do that. But for me, who was driven and ambitious and kind of wanted to leave a mark, that was how I figured out how to do it. Was just, I knew to get to where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And then I had to be uncomfortable. And one of the things I also say to students a lot is, and this probably applies to any sort of creative industry, is it's the easiest business to quit. It's so easy to quit, and people tell you to quit all the time, and the signs point to you to quit all the time. And it's really just building that thick skin, but also knowing you can push through it. You can really push through it, having the confidence, wherever that comes from, to push through it.
Yeah.
That is something that I like to sort of tell students, and a lot of them don't like to hear that, because often if you're presented a reason to quit, most people take it.
Yeah.
It's the easy road. This is not an easy business to kind of build a career in. But if you work hard, and like I said, these small steps, every day, whatever it takes, you'll get there.
Yeah. Especially when you get to a point where you start looking back at them, and you see the small steps that were actually really huge steps, but you didn't realize it.
You don't see it at the time.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's taking those risks and,
Yeah.
figuring it out. Like, I said yes to everything, and because I just needed to learn. I really need. People ask me how I kind of built a career to become a producer, and basically what I say, I was always a producer. The only thing that's changed is the budget levels that I deal with. Like, when I was a student, I was a producer, and I would kind of put myself into a situation where I could make projects and kind of lead projects, and that's it. Kind of was playing, for some reason I had this feeling that I should play by my own rules, or whatever it is, figure it out myself. Like, it was on me. If I was going to figure this out, I had to figure it out. And the other thing that kind of got me through it too is I knew I wanted to make television, and like I was just a kid from Nova Scotia. I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
But in my head, and whether it was a mantra or not, it was sort of like, well, somebody's got to make television.
Yeah.
Well, why can't it be me?
Yeah.
Like, and that sort of got me through it. And it was just sort of, okay, if I want to make television, I have to figure out how television works. I have to figure out who makes television. I have to learn from them. And it was just putting myself in those situations to get those tools and those relationships that would help me move forward.
Yeah, that's great. So, working with it was S&S, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Productions. What were you doing with them?
So I started, basically we had a show. We sold this show, and I was a producer on the show. I was an owner of the show. I had a partnership with a woman named Jane Ford, and we owned a small production company that developed IP, and we ended up selling a sketch comedy show. And so we brought the show into S&S, and they would act as our executive producer. So they ended up doing kind of the business side, which is what I do now. So I really learned under kind of the direction and tutelage of Dave Smith and kind of his team, how the business side of television. And so we did a season of that show. So I was a producer on that show, and Dave was the executive producer along with Jane. And I kind of just learned how money worked. I learned how financing worked. I learned how budgets worked. I learned how cash flow worked. Like, all these kind of really, basic for me, like these building blocks of television on the financing that you actually don't learn in school.
Yeah.
So it was really, I was getting my hands dirty on all that. And then that show did not get picked up for a second season. And I went down a couple paths. One was, I became friends with, and this is a long story, but or it doesn't need to be, but I became friends with a friend of yours, Brian Edwards, who was a tour promoter.
Yeah.
And because I was working on, we actually sort of knew each other because the university my dad was an administrator at, St. Thomas University in Fredericton. they gave Stomp and Tom Connors a university, an honorary degree, honorary doctorate. And so that kind of started the connection with Brian. I was in university at the time, and Tom came to Fredericton, and Brian was there. So my family and Brian got to know each other a little bit. And then when I moved to Toronto and started working interning at CBC and started getting jobs, a lot of the jobs I was doing, these small freelance gigs, were on live event television. So it was like a Canada Day special, or we did a show from concert from Rideau Hall, and my path just kept crossing with Brian's. And we did a Tommy Hunter special together, and we just developed a friendship that remains to this day. We're great friends, and we always just talked about how do we work together. Like, he had access to this talent and was so great at, and is so great at what he does, and I had this interest in television and production, and we just started talking. It's like, how do we connect the dots on this? So, we put sort of a plan together and started thinking, and basically we came up with the idea of, wouldn't it be great to film the concerts that Brian was promoting? So we kind of looked at it became a really interesting business model where, Brian was promoting these, he was having the live performances. That was sort of a revenue stream for him. Merchandise was a revenue stream as well. But it's like, what if we create some content? How do we kind of monetize that? How do those become revenue streams? So our first project was with Charlie Pride. He's like, this is a great act. I think we'll be able to do something with this. And the idea was like, let's film a concert. Let's go on the road. Let's shoot some behind the scenes documentary style footage, and let's create a DVD and see what happens with it. So we created this DVD, and it did really well. Charlie toured with it, and Brian toured with it. We sold it. It was in Walmarts and Costco's. It became a piece of tour merchandise. A live album was released from it. So it was, all of a sudden, we're like, this was a real success. And in fact, I have the platinum album.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Right here. And then we're like, okay, well, who's next? And next was Stomp and Tom. So we did one with Stomp and Tom. And what's interesting with that is, I had a connection to Tom through the family, but also as a fan. I'd seen him in concert a few times, and we're just like, this is an important project to do. And I got to know Tom really well. I spent a lot of time at his house, and we ended up selling the show to CTV. And so it became a piece of merchandise, and it went to the label. It became a platinum selling album or DVD for them as well. But the real sort of story is that CTV bought it and became their Canada Day special for that year. I think that was 2006, maybe 2007. And it really kind of sort of announced my arrival as an independent producer to CTV. And, then I sort of had some bona fide credentials and credits with CTV, where that kind of changed the conversation as an independent producer. And I was young. I was, 32 at the time. And all of a sudden I was able to have sort of real meetings and real conversations and start to think about what having a real production company business would look like. And then, so we went through Brian's roster. We did DVDs with Rita McNeil, with the Von Trapps. And then I went, part of this time, then I went back to S&S. And I went back there to run development for them and any production that we could build. So we got a few productions going there. And then, which was great, we did a comedy series for Comedy Network called Hot Box, which was a fun little sketch comedy series. We did a travel series for Outdoor Life Network called Which Way To. And then it was around 2009, a friend of mine contacted me and he said, listen, there's this opportunity here. We have an investor and he wants to invest in a production company. If you want to come and run the independent production side of it, let's make that happen. And so I ended up leaving S&S Productions to go do that, and that's Project 10, which is where we are right now.
Yeah.
And the investor is a guy by the name of Vernon Wells, who used to be the center fielder for the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah.
And so he's just been a great friend and such an amazing supporter of what I've been doing and what we've been trying to build for 10 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
So did he have a background interest in that, or just a straight?
No, he didn't have any. He had an interest in it. He had an interest in kind of the idea of creating content and kind of being involved in that. And there's something sort of fun and glamorous around TV and I think a lot of athletes you see like that. There are other athletes that have production companies as well, but Vernon really committed to sort of the vision and what we wanted to do and kind of how we wanted to get there. He didn't have any experience in it, but understood that there was, there were opportunities here.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's a great story. I mean, and I didn't know your connection went back with Brian back to the Stomp and Tom at the university there and all that. So
early days.
Yeah, and because my relationship with Brian goes back a long time too. Probably back to when I was in my teens.
Oh, wow.
And then I did the first Stomp and Tom tour in 92, I think that was.
I would have seen you in Sackville.
Yeah, I was there. Yeah, I think I was there. But yeah, we probably crossed paths a couple of times without really realizing it. So obviously you've done a bunch of productions. Schitt's Creek is really doing super well.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how that kind of came about.
Yeah. Again, it's sort of a story of relationships, and we sort of the first big show that Project 10 got going was Spun Out, which was this sitcom starring Dave Foley, and I had a really hard time on the financing side of it, putting the pieces together and how we were going to make this work. We were looking at a big deficit.
Yeah.
And it was the first time where I'd been kind of handed the keys to sort of, millions and millions of dollars and to deliver a series. And it was terrifying. And because, it was kind of just me. There wasn't a lot of people I could turn to.
Yeah.
And I ended up building a relationship with a guy by the name of Peter Sussman. And Peter Sussman is another great friend and a great mentor, and he used to run Alliance Atlantis, which was sort of a big behemoth sort of production company. They owned channels, and then they were bought, in a great deal and he went from going from Alliance Atlantis, where they sold the company, they sold their biggest show, which was CSI, and he started a bank that would sort of help producers and help cash flow shows and that sort of thing. So he became sort of almost the epicenter for independent production in Canada.
Yeah.
And we developed a relationship, and he really advised me well on Spun Out and helped kind of put some of the pieces together. And after the first season of Spun Out, he's like, Andrew, let's get to know each other a little bit, and let's go to a baseball game. So we went to go see a Jays game, and we sat there, we talked for 8 innings, and then in the 9th inning, Peter said, "So, do you think you could take on another show? Would you be interested in producing another show?" I was like, "Yeah, I feel I have the first season of Spun Out under my belt. I know how it works. I know how to make TV. I know how to build teams, and I have a team in place. I think we could, slot in another show pretty easily." He's like, "Okay." A friend of mine looks like he's gonna have a show sold to CBC.
Mm-hmm.
He's looking for a producer to work with. Maybe I can make an introduction and see if there's something there. By the way, his name's Eugene Levy.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, it was the end of the game, and it kind of like the night ended on that.
Yeah.
And the next day, it's one of these things in this business, and I'm sure it's the same on the music side. You never really know what's real, what isn't. People talk like, you can't take anything to the bank until you actually can, right? And so the next day, I sent Peter an email, and I said, "Listen, Peter, I just wanted to let you know I'm really I want to reinforce how interested I am in working on that new show. Let me know what I can do. Let me know who I need to talk to.
And who's this Eugene Levy guy?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think I've heard of him.
Yeah. Is he a shortstop or?
Yeah. But no, but like, I mean, it was such a wild moment because when I first saw American Pie, I actually saw it in LA at Universal Studios, and it just was actually a very meaningful moment for me in my life. And I just remember coming out of the theater and just being blown away by Eugene's performance and just being a proud Canadian, and then sort of come here and I'm so close. I'm a 1 degree of separation or 2 degrees of separation from Eugene.
Yeah.
And so I send a note to Peter the next day and I say, I'm still interested, tell me what I can do. And I don't hear from him. I don't, there's crickets for, you can play the cricket sound effect. Yeah, there you go. That's what it was.
See, I can use it now.
Yeah, that's good. We've been waiting for a moment. For 2 weeks, I didn't hear anything.
Uh-huh.
And then and it was one of these things where it's like, it was too good to be true. Obviously, it's not going to happen. And then 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from somebody from Peter's office saying, Andrew, just want to let you know, you've been approved by CBC to produce the show. Next thing you have to, we want you to meet Eugene. So come on in tomorrow and meet with Eugene.
Wow.
So I went to Peter's office the next day, met with you, and it was I just didn't know. I had just had this nervous energy, and I didn't really know kind of what to expect. And Eugene came in, and it was Eugene Levy, and we just talked for 15 minutes. And at the end of the meeting, he said, "Okay, well, if Peter thinks you're the guy to do this, let's do it." So, and that was it. And then we kind of just started putting the pieces together on the series, and working with just an incredible creative team, and we found a way to make it work. And those guys the Levys have been so supportive. I work very closely with Eugene, very closely with Dan, very closely with Fred, who's Eugene's brother, and it's just been an incredible sort of life-changing experience for me, and it's really helped. I did have a big show on air with Spun Out, but just being connected to Schitt's Creek for the past 5 years has really kind of changed everything, changed the conversation.
Yeah, it's another. It's like getting that door into CTV that first time.
Yeah.
It's just another door that opened up, right?
Yeah, and like I was in LA last week, and I normally stay on Sunset Boulevard, and Whiskey A Go Go, which is this iconic club and music venue, is wrapped in Schitt's Creek posters.
No way.
Yeah, and it's just like, how did this happen? Like, I remember the first season I went down to New York with the team for some press, and I'll never forget this. It was like late one night. We'd been the cast had been going to shows, and we went to a small party because Chris Elliott had just done Letterman. Yeah. And then it was like 2 a.m, and we're all like, there's a billboard. There's a Schitt's Creek billboard in Times Square. And there's like 8 of us. We got into a SUV, and we just all, it was like 2 or 3 a.m. There was nobody there, but we just went to go look at the Schitt's Creek billboard. That's awesome. It's just like, how did this happen? Like, this is not Canada. This is Times Square. And then to have moments like that where, and that just doesn't happen. And I know that, and other people in Canada know that. So it's a very special show. It's a very special moment in time for me. And, hopefully, you kind of hope there's going to be more shows like that in your career. But I think this one is pretty special. Yeah,
I would guess so. So as far as being the executive producer on that show, and maybe explain to some people who'd be listening your details a bit more, and would you be involved with salary pitches and all that stuff? You look after that and things as well?
I mean, basically, the first year of a show is often the toughest one, because you're kind of building the architecture and the blueprints for the show. So that's where you put all the pieces together on the business side. And listen, I don't touch the creative on that show. It's in good hands with Dan and Eugene, and it's just they know what they're doing. So my job is just to make sure that what they get on the page is executable on the screen. So we put the teams together, and it's really, I work closely with, as I mentioned, lawyers and the banks, and so it's, first of all, it's making sure that we can cash flow the show, that we have enough money, or that it's budgeted properly. So I work with a team, what's called a line producer, who we budget the show, and then we take that to the broadcaster and we sell them on that, and then we talk to the bank to make sure that they'll lend against what the broadcaster is committing, what our tax credit calculations are, and kind of put the business financing side together. And then it's working closely with the lawyers to negotiate with cast, and that's done very closely with the Levies as well. But yeah, it's just putting all those pieces together that you actually need to execute on a script to get it to the screen. And
I'm assuming none of that happens overnight. That's a bit of a process.
No,
you got to wait on everybody else.
Yeah, and these are big ships that you're kind of trying to steer into a direction, and especially when there's multiple stakeholders. There's stakeholders on the creative side, there's stakeholders on the talent side, there's stakeholders on the broadcast side, on the distribution side. So it's really, a lot of my job is just sort of connecting those people and making sure everything's moving forward. All those pieces are moving forward.
So when the show gets to the position it is now, when you're doing a new season, putting all those numbers together again, does it get a little easier each year that the success of the show is?
Yeah. I mean, there's a limit on how much money you can raise too. So you're always up against that, and you're always feeling kind of the downward pressure on the budget. It's not, because we're in Canada, and just the nature of the business, there's never enough money. So we're always really, we have enough to make the show, but we're always squeezing and looking for ways to get what money we do have on the screen. And listen, it's a big budget show, so we do have resource and we are supported, but you want to do as much as you can with the resource that you have. But to answer your question, things do become a bit easier because you have your relationships in place. You have a rhythm to the production cycle that and your team knows. So it does get a little bit easier, but you also never want to get complacent and take your eye off the ball or anything like that. So because there are things that can slip through the cracks. But no, it's a great team, and we're supported by the broadcaster, the Canadian broadcaster, the US broadcaster, the international distributor, the banks, the lawyers. All these are all the people that come together to get the show where it needs to be.
It must be pretty exciting.
It's really exciting. It's really exciting.
So the new show with Jan, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that.
That's pretty exciting.
It's really exciting.
Jan is pretty...
She's awesome.
Yeah, she's multi-talent. She's has it all. I mean, she's that type of person. How did this show come about? Whose idea was this show?
This was Jan's idea.
Was it?
Yeah. So basically, I had a mutual friend.
Did she pitch you to come here, and then you said, "I'll think about it for a while"?
Well, it's not far from that. So basically, we have a mutual friend. So there's one of our lawyers that we were working with on Schitt's Creek, is a woman named Portia Gauthier. Her sister she works in entertainment. She's an entertainment lawyer. Her sister is a woman by the name of Leah Gauthier. She's works in television on the factual side, sort of lifestyle reality factual side. Yeah. She's good friends with Leah, or she's good friends with Jan. So there's sort of this connection made to Jan, and Jan, had seen what television I'd been making, and appreciated it. And she'd been approached many, many times to be on TV shows, to be cast on shows. So a connection was made, an introduction was made, and Jan called me. So we set a time to call, and it was just the two of us on the phone. And, she said, I'm thinking now might be the time for me to make a TV show. Yeah. She's like, lots of people have approached me, lots of producers have approached me, but I really want it to be right. I want the time to be right. I want the show to be right. So I'm open to starting a conversation. So that was really nice to hear. It was, an honor to talk to her and to kind of hear what she had to say. And for me, it's always like, let's make this easy. Let's not force anything. So we said, let's take our time, figure out what the show is you want to make, work with Leah, and why don't we just start kind of spitballing some ideas? And I have there's somebody who works at Project 10, a guy by the name of Ben Murray, who oversees development and production for Project 10. And he got involved, and we just started this kind of conversation. There was 4 of us. It was me, it was Ben, it was Jan, and it was Leah. And it's just like, how do we build something here? What is it? And we came up with an idea, or they came up with an idea. They bounced it off us. We were like, okay, there's really something here. And we're like, we know that we need to add a creative piece to this, a creative powerhouse to the team. Somebody who's done scripted television on the creative side. Yeah. So we met a number of writers, and we found a woman by the name of Jenica Harper to join the team. She came from sort of scripted television. And then we just kind of handed it back to Leah, Jan, and Jenica, and it's like, okay, figure out what the show is. So we spent about a year developing it, just internally, before even talking to broadcasters about it. And they came up with this idea that was great. So Jan sort of plays a version of herself. It's kind of like a Larry David, Curb Your Enthusiasm type show. But it's funny, but it has a huge heart, and it's really about Jan. It's arguably semi-autobiographical, because she her name is Jan Arden in the show. Yeah. And she touches on celebrity and fame and kind of chasing it, but she also really gets into some personal stuff too. She's she's had to deal with a mother who was facing Alzheimer's and dementia, and who passed away recently. But that stuff, Jan will be the first to tell you have to find the humor in that. You really have to find a way to kind of push through and kind of enjoy life and find the silver lining. And that's really what this show is meant to do. So we tackle that stuff. We steer right into it, and it's real, it's honest, and it's like, if anybody who's seen Jan in concert, that's what she's like. She's hilarious, but you go from laughing like a maniac to just crying like a baby at her shows.
It's kind of open book.
It's incredible, and the show is so in Jan's voice, and she's amazing. Like this, she really sunk her teeth into it, and she carries the show, which is a very hard job to do on screen. She's the star of it, and she has an amazing performance from beginning to end. But when it came to kind of the selling of the show, which was kind of interesting, is that we always felt like the right home for it was Bell Media and CTV. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons is the president of Bell Media is a guy by the name of Randy Lennox, and Randy used to be the president of Universal Music. Universal Music was is Jan's label, and it just kind of, we were able to connect the dots there. We also worked, I got to know and work very closely with Jan's manager, a guy by the name of Bruce Allen, and Bruce Allen is just sort of a force in entertainment.
It's pretty big.
Yeah. So and he's just been so supportive of what we've been doing, and Randy's been so supportive, and it's such a great story of how the show got to where it is right now. And now we're a month and a half away from it going to air, and I really feel we have something so special that Jan fans, but also, people just discovering her for the first time are really gonna love it.
Yeah, because there's going to be a big market, younger market, who are not going to know her as well as the older market. And it'll be a new life there, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, Jan is so smart in terms of building her career, and Bruce is so smart. They really get how to do that, and this is a piece of that story. But Bell Media is throwing everything at it as well. So it's one of these great positive stories of how to get something going and getting something made. And soon we'll release it to the world and see what happens.
Yeah, that must be exciting and must be nerve-wracking at the same time, because you want it to be really great and accepted, but you just don't know.
You don't know until you know.
No.
Yeah. But I think you kind of get sort of anecdotal feedback from people that have seen cuts and
Yeah.
that have worked on the show and stuff like that. So it feels like we're onto something, but you really don't know,
And you always have that risk too. You release that first night. You never know. Trump might say something in the news, and all of a sudden, everyone's watching the news, and your first night gets preempted by something that happens in the world, and then does that change the shift of, where it's supposed to be? You just never know.
Yeah.
With TV,
Thanks for putting
especially.
that thought in my mind.
Yeah, I know. Sleep on that one.
No, it's true. Like you there's so much you can't control in this business, and especially when you're scheduled.
Yeah.
Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah. But it's must be pretty exciting though. I mean,
it's really exciting,
especially when you see it on the Super Bowl. And, that's
no, I'm very proud. I'm very proud of the team. I'm very proud of how we put it together, the relationships around it, and the final product too. Like it's.
Where'd you shoot?
We shot in Calgary.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So that was something that was important to all of us. It was important to Jan, but we really wanted to celebrate Calgary. So Calgary is the setting. It's a bit of a love letter to Calgary in terms of the beauty shots of the city, and it was great. Like I spent a fair bit of time in Calgary last fall, and I hope to do it again this year and for many years. I was impressed with the city. It had changed a lot since when I lived out west.
Yeah, it's a great city.
It's a great city. Yeah.
It seems that it's moved where a lot of the other cities haven't.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I really liked about it was just sort of the public art installations around. Like you just turn a corner and there's a beautiful piece of public art, and it's surprising and progressive too. And it takes sort of municipal leadership to put that in place.
Yeah. Yeah. How many episodes did you do?
We did 6 episodes.
6
episodes. Yeah.
So, once the 6 episodes are done, I guess at that point you find out whether you're going to do the next.
Yeah, our
next
fingers
run.
are crossed.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can keep that going.
So how soon do you think you find out until you can start thinking about the next run?
Well, I mean, we're thinking about it already. So we're starting to think about what future episodes and future seasons look like. But in terms of a commitment, I think, there's a process you have to go through, and it's, we'll probably have to get feedback and numbers on a couple of episodes, maybe the whole run, before we start having real serious conversations about, what are we making a season 2? How do we make a season 2? What does that look like? But again, we're all the team. It's a solid team. We co-produce the series with a Calgary production company. So it's a solid team all around. And I think the show will do well. But we have all the pieces and all the team members to
feels
keep going.
good.
Yeah, it feels really good.
So what else? Do you have anything else in the works? Are you?
There's
always something, right?
I mean, it's sort of a bit of a laundry list, but we always have shows in development with broadcasters here in Canada. But we opened an office in Los Angeles 3 years ago, and it's really been focusing on development. Yeah. So basically, we're investing in finding scripts, building content around voices that speak to us. And this year, in the next few months, we're going to be rolling it. We shot a couple presentation pilots that we funded ourselves. So we're going to start taking those out in the U.S. and hopefully we can get some traction on some shows down there. We're involved in a new show, a tween show that's going to go to air in Canada. We're going to shoot that this summer. We're involved in a pilot on a show that goes into production next week. So there's a lot. We definitely keep busy, and it's a pretty small company, but we're a pretty nimble company. And we're at a really interesting time where, reputationally we're in a good place, and people know that we're good people to work with, and that we get things made too, which is kind of when you're looking to partner. That's sort of what the creative side wants to know, is that we'll get it. They will get the best shot if they work with somebody like us.
Yeah. But
there's lots. We're building a pitch slate that we're going to take out in Canada. The U.S. side is busy and active, and then we're busy on the production side here.
So as a young person wanting to get into TV production and all that type of thing, This is probably a question you get asked lots, but what steps do you think are important for a young person to get into the TV industry?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, I have actually a real commitment to talking to young filmmakers, young TV makers. I work very closely with the Toronto Film School here in Toronto. I'm the executive producer in residence there. So that means I spend a lot of time talking to students and kind of answering that question exactly. So, the way I answer it is you kind of have to think about what are the tools you need for a career in this. And one of the tricky things about this is that it's not a resume business. It's not something where you apply for a job and you get a job. So how do you position yourself most favorably to be noticed and have somebody sort of hire you or invest in you, that sort of thing. So for me, kind of what I speak to are, you probably need an educational foundation. So there's real value in going to school to kind of understand how production works, to understand, if you want to be a writer, what are the mechanics of writing? If you want to be a director, what does that mean? What are the skills you need to get? Just to get that foundation. And then it's a relationship business. So it's about, finding your network of people that you can support and they can support you. And I think, it's important for those relationships. It's important for a lot of those relationships to be people at the same age and stage as you. Yeah. But it's also really important to find relationships and build relationships with people that are 5 years older than you, 10 years older than you, 20 years older than you. So you can kind of learn from those experiences and really kind of have those mentor relationships. So like education, relationships, but then it's about sort of, personal characteristics. Like you kind of have to be a risk taker. Yeah. And you kind of have to know what you want to do. When you know what you want to do and you have a goal, things become a bit easier because you make decisions and choices based on where you want to get. So those are kind of the sort of the broad piece of advice I give. But for me, like, I've always had a goal. I've always had something that I've been working towards. And, when your goal is, I want to produce a television series, every single situation you get into and every single decision you make is, will this help me get to be a series producer or won't it? And then you kind of filter down, and over time, you start to get closer and closer to where you want to be. And it takes time. Like, I'm not the first to say this, but, sometimes it takes 15 years to be an overnight success.
Yeah. Oh, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's hard to hear sometimes for somebody young who kind of just wants to go and take over the world and kind of leave their mark.
Yeah. And I think young kids nowadays, because everything is instant to them, they want their career to be instant too. Yeah. And that's a tough thing to sit back and relax. I mean, you can, we were talking before we started the podcast and how we've kind of changed points in a career where we find we're mentoring where we didn't before. And, and I look at meeting younger people, and I'm sure you feel the same way. You can pretty well tell in a few minutes whether someone's got something or not, without even knowing their resume or knowing what they do. There's just something about certain people that you find there's like that drive, you said, or that excitement about something. And
an energy, a spirit, like something that you can just tell.
There's lots of things you can still teach. And when you're young, you kind of have to learn anyways. But there's that something about, that energy and being excited and really want to be the go-getter, or someone who's consistent, maybe someone who's calling and wants to meet, but, just calls once.
Right. Yeah. It's showing up.
Yeah. So you may not take that call, but if they've called 15 times, maybe eventually you're going to go, okay, maybe I better just talk.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Because there might be something worthwhile here.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that has surprised me about, these are students. Every class I go in to talk to, I always leave my email address and say, reach out to me anytime. And I'm committed to getting back to everybody who gets in touch with me. I'll go for coffee. I will have a phone call. the amount of people that get in touch with me is very close to zero.
Yeah.
Which is surprising. It was surprising to me when I first discovered that. Like that, here, and then the people that do reach out, those are the ones that are the ambitious ones, that are driven, that really feel, have a real shot at making it. But I would say sort of the conversion rate from me putting my email address on a board to them emailing is probably less than 1%.
It's pretty scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty, I think about, we have, our family has our theater that we've been running for, this is our 19th season. And, a while ago we used to have events where local businesses in the area would come and we'd talk business, would be a speaker or something.
Right.
And in our area, we're basically the biggest tourist attraction.
Yeah.
So all these people are coming in that own these little stores and B&Bs and all these things that could take advantage of knowing that there's...
Well, you're a draw.
Yeah, knowing that there's 30, 40,000 people coming to this venue and basically leaving because they don't know anything else to do. And we had these events 2 or 3 times, and there would even be a little brochure swap where they put, on the table and stuff. Yeah. And people would, at the end, everything would be done, they pick up the brochures and walk out the door and go home.
Yeah.
And I sat there a couple times and be like, I can't believe there was no one that came up and said, hey, could we leave our brochures here?
Right.
Or could we work together somehow? Or I know you've got a lot of, people just, and I'm thinking, okay, you just spent a whole day out of your life to come here and communicate with other people that are in your area. Then you just got up and left.
It's remarkable.
It's like, why did you come?
Yeah. And you realize the solution is so easy.
Yeah.
It's sticking around. It's building a relationship.
Yeah.
Like it's not hard. And I think, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the type of person or, I go into classrooms and say that exact same thing. And I say, most people are going to quit. Yeah. But then I don't get the emails. Like it's really interesting, and I, maybe there's an intimidation factor. I don't think I am. I try to be very open, but and I'm offering this, and I've told them that I've met with students. I'm there to help and this sort of thing. But yeah, it's fascinating. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's kind of strange. I mean, you take, the people in your life that you maybe go back to Brian Edwards, who I know got together. You guys went and out to eat and talked for a long time, he's told me.
Yeah.
And he's really great at building those relationships and keeping those relationships. Yeah. And when we tour and are out working all the time and we do a lot of work together, I see and it's from every direction you could think of. He's got a relationship with someone in WestJet. He's got a relationship with someone at this place. And it's just like, wow, how do you manage to create all those relationships? But it's very crucial and very important to what he does.
He lives and dies on his relationships.
No, if something goes wrong or there's something that needs to be done, he can make a phone call and usually something gets done.
Yeah. Exactly.
And he's really good at making those relationships both ways.
Yeah.
So that he feels he's giving, make sure they get something. So when
I've learned a lot from Brian, and when I kind of look at the people in my life who've got me where I am, he's top 5, maybe top 3. Like he's really professionally and as a friend, like I've learned so much from him. He's supported me in ways that he didn't need to, and it's really and it's a close relationship, and we connected, and I've experienced that with Brian. I know exactly, you feel like you're getting more than you're giving with him. And it's special. He's a very supportive friend, and also he's been through it too. Like he started young, and he kind of he was ambitious and driven and took risks, and I think when he sees that in people, he understands the importance of supporting that. Yeah, and no, he for sure. Like my life would be very different if it wasn't for my relationship with him and kind of the support and access he gave me.
Yeah,
over the years.
Yeah, he's really great for that.
Yeah.
So let's wrap this up with looking on the next 10, 20 years. Do you look far in advance, or are you just a person who kind of takes it as it's going along?
No, I'm always. I don't know if I'm looking 20 years ahead yet, but I think about that a lot. But definitely 5 years ahead. I really, I still want to be, have the Canadian side making television here. I'm finding new shows, but I really hope Jan is a huge hit 5 years from now, and I hope it has. I expect it to have a global audience, or at least a U.S. audience, as the show builds and that moves forward. But also, I believe that an object in motion stays in motion. So it's finding ways to increase bandwidth, increase my ability to take on new projects that excite me in Canada, but in the U.S. as well. I really am spending a lot of time focusing on building the U.S. side of the business, trying to kind of support that and figure out how to make that work. The businesses are a bit different, but in 5 years, I'd like to think we have a couple shows on the air in Canada, a couple shows on the air in the U.S., and we're just building out the production side of the company. When I look further ahead, it's building a library for the company and maybe looking at distribution, building infrastructure that we can kind of just create efficiencies, like, building edit suites or having sound stages, that sort of thing. But to continue to grow, I think I want to grow it out of Canada. Like, Toronto's my home now, Canada's my home, but I am very much somebody who lives here but thinks internationally, thinks globally, and kind of just building those networks of relationships in Canada, in the U.S., but around the world too. I love meeting new people. That's something that helps, that excites me. I like looking for new opportunities. That excites me. And I like moving forward. And I also like that I never know what is going to happen today.
Yeah.
I like waking up and it's just, I'm not going and doing something routine. It's every day is different.
Yeah.
And so I get a lot out of that. I really enjoy what I do. Some days are a lot harder than others, but I've been through enough hard days to know that you get through them.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're difficult and you have to have difficult conversations or solve a difficult problem. But you do come out stronger. And
you go home and have a glass of wine.
Yeah, exactly. And then you just hope that people see what you're doing, they like what you're doing, they're excited about what you're doing, you build strong teams, you elevate. I'm very much about elevating the people around me. Like and my management style is very much about giving people the tools they need to succeed, supporting them, giving them autonomy, stepping back and hopefully and not getting in the way. I can get in the way, and nobody needs me in the way.
Yeah.
So I really think when you surround yourself with the right people, support them, part of my vision is my team's vision too. Like, I really just want to make sure we're all moving in the right direction, and who knows where we'll end up. But we should check in 20 years.
I know.
It's going to be interesting. I can guarantee that.
I look back 20 years, I was like, man, it's a lot changed.
No kidding.
So we'll wrap on one more quick question.
Yep.
When you go home and want to watch TV, besides the shows you produce and have, work around, what do you gravitate towards?
I gravitate to, I'll tell you a couple of things. So I gravitate towards comedy. That is really kind of my comfort food.
We talked earlier, we're both Howard Stern fans.
Yeah, I'm a huge Howard Stern fan. I get a lot of inspiration from Howard Stern. I just, what he's done. And believe me, one of my go-to movies is Private Parts. It holds up. I love those origin stories.
Yeah.
Where it's against all odds stories, like, how he kind of changed radio, changed entertainment, and the most unlikely human to do that. And I feel I can relate to that to a certain degree. I love that. I get inspiration from a lot of those stories. Like, kind of my heroes are Howard Stern, like Dwayne Johnson is one, like Eminem, like these people that changed the world, but from very humble beginnings, like and took risks and believed in themselves and were willing to roll the dice. But in terms of what I watch, I gravitate towards comedy, generally half-hour comedies. I serialized comedies. So shows I watch are kind of like HBO shows like Crashing. That's one that I'm watching. But if I'm ever just looking for something to watch, I don't want to think too hard about making a choice or start a new series, I go back to The Office.
Oh yeah,
every time. Yeah, and I still enjoy reruns of Seinfeld too. The Curb Your Enthusiasm, like those are ones that really I get a lot of joy out of. And then another guilty pleasure is Adam Sandler movies for some reason. Yes, I can't stop. I will tune into Adam Sandler movies when it shows up.
I went to see Adam in Vegas. He was doing a stand-up with a bunch of his friends, and I was really bummed.
Yeah?
I didn't find him funny
don't
at all.
That. Yeah.
I know, and I was so bummed because I was such a big fan, and he kind of was the closer, and and I don't know, I thought I was just expecting more or something different, but as a stand-up I didn't get it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'm a big stand-up fan. I mean, I think it's great, especially in the world where you're doing comedy shows, that being in the comedy world is just taken off. Like stand-up comedy is just bigger than it's ever been.
Yeah.
And that all helps, I think. But it's interesting seeing all these new stars and old stars that are becoming super famous and being famous from doing podcasts and
exactly.
like Rogan and who's really popular, but he's Well,
the thing about stand-up, what's amazing and why it's kind of having a moment right now is because it's about one point of view. For stand-up to work, it's about specificity. It's about one person's take on the world.
Yeah.
And if you look at the shows that work on TV and the movies that work, I was sort of saying earlier, we really moved away from broad comedy to very specific comedy.
Yeah.
And that's about a singular voice. And stand-up is about a singular voice. And that's sort of, it's transitioned, that appetite for a singular voice has transitioned from stand-up being the only place to where TV is. So where you're now getting the big stars, the really big stars in TV now are the showrunners, the show creators. I mean, you still have the on-screen stars, but it's impossible to find voices. Finding voices that work for TV is very hard, but when you do find them, you build shows around them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that's a stand-up sensibility.
Yeah.
So I get it. And that's sort of, you're buying into a voice, you're buying into a character, you're buying into a point of view, and it works. It really works. And that's, I was always drawn to stand-up. I've gone back and looked at Eddie Murphy, and I do not recommend going back and watching all Eddie Murphy.
I've done a little bit of that too.
But that's where, that was like a point of view.
Yeah.
Dice was a point of view. Like these big, huge names. George Carlin was a point of view. That's what really got me interested in comedy. And things like Codco, that was a point of view. That was like a voice. Kids in the Hall, like those were very specific sensibilities, and that's sort of what really drew me into comedy. So when I'm on the hunt for show ideas and pitches and that sort of thing, it's always like, and my advice to writers is write something only you can write. Tell a story only you can write, and then you don't have to. You also don't ever have to worry about anybody stealing it either.
Yeah.
If you're the only person who can tell this story, you're onto something.
Yeah.
I've had people come in and pitch, and it's just they pitch the broadest story possible, and it's just like, why are you the one to tell this story?
Yeah, that makes total
sense. To me,
sense.
the pitch, my answer or my reaction to most pitching is, why you? Why is this your story? And if you can't answer it in a personal way, it's not right. It's not the right story.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Well, thanks for taking a bunch of your time tonight.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I know
This
you're a
was
busy
so
guy,
fun.
and it's been a pleasure getting to know more about you.
Yeah, thank you.
And we should follow up in 20.
Yeah, we don't need to wait that long. But let's keep checking in every once in a while.
Yeah, it'd be great. I'm really excited to see the new show, and looking forward to that one for sure.
Well,
I'll have to find some local TV.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, you do. You'll need to update your
I
satellite
gotta go out
subscription.
and get some coat hangers up in the television.
Exactly. Thanks so much, Darren.
Thanks a lot.
Great.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah.